must not be a capitalist system because we don't want to exploit anybody. We don't want to be exploited, and we don't want to exploit anybody.
Ain't nobody going to do it for us. There's nobody outside of yourself, nobody outside of ourselves that's going to do this work for us. We have to put in that real work.
Because the better you are at exploiting people, the more successful you are within capitalism.
We want to say salute to all our political prisoners, our POWs, our elder comrades in exile.
The satisfaction we need as a people only comes through liberation and independence.
Because we're not just building for self, we're building for the family, because the family is broken. We're building for the community is broken. The nation is broken. The race is under attack. We're in a state of emergency.
You're tuned in to the New African Broadcast Association, where we
we always say in the Black Panther Party that they can do anything they want to us. We might not be back. I might be in jail. I might be anywhere. But when I leave, you can remember I said with the last words on my lips that I am a revolutionary.
These are the voices of New Africa. These are the voices of New Africa. These are the voices of New Africa. Free in the land, and we ain't asking y'all.
All right, y'all. We are live. Let me do this real quick. You're listening to the Voices of New Africa, the show that is not only dedicated to the liberation of New African people, but where we educate the uneducated and re-educate the miseducated. I am your host, Brother Prophecy. I'm trying to adjust my comrade for Dolly camera, so we can. There you go. Now you all in view. But yeah, I'm your host, Brother Prophecy, and I'm with my elder grandmaster teacher for Dolly. How you doing today, Brother for Dolly?
It's a great day, particularly for us beginning to understand Martin Luther King and who Martin Luther King was. It's a good day for that, even though we know that they're neglecting the truth of Martin Luther King as far as the movement is concerned.
Okay.
We're here to correct that.
Okay. Let's get into that for a second, because today is actually Martin Luther King's birthday, and tomorrow is the day that they celebrated nationally. It's a national holiday. But it seems to me, when I'm examining Dr. Martin Luther King and looking at his history, the actual history, especially where he was headed toward the time of his death, it seems like today, the Martin Luther King that we celebrated in the national spotlight, in the media, and the government says, yeah, we love Martin Luther King, we love him, we love him, we love him. Seems like that Martin Luther King has been colonized, just like so much of our history, and whitewashed, and they really are neglecting, where Martin Luther King was headed, kind of talk about, where Martin Luther King was actually going by the time of his death. Was he still on that turn the other cheek? We want to have a dream about integrating toilets so black and white people can sit on the same toilet together. Or, what direction was Dr. King headed?
Right. Within a year's time, in 1967, April 4th, 1967, and when King made his speech on Vietnam, it signaled a change in King in terms of movement from civil rights to human rights, because he talked about the viciousness of the United States, in the war in Vietnam, and so his position on the war in Vietnam, King had been pursued by people in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, to change his position or to update his position on Vietnam. So finally, in April of '67, he came up with one of his greatest speeches. Actually, some people say it's his greatest speech, in which he laid out how vicious the United States has been in terms of, and how we are being exploited. And the United States has been promoting exploitation all out and creating wars in different countries, and keeping countries from having their real independence, such as Vietnam. And so consequently, that's when King really became a serious threat to the FBI and other agencies in terms of how, where the image of the United States was concerned. Whereas and his fellow ministers around him, were trying to get King not to move, out to human rights. They wanted to stay within the confines of civil rights. They didn't want to do anything that had anything to do with international. Even though King was given the Nobel Peace Prize, which some people say that was a cross that was put on his shoulder, because King was an honest man, and King, couldn't accept an award unless he was really doing what he was supposed to do. And here we are, the contradiction of the United States making war. And so here King had to give his criticism, and became one of his greatest speeches. And this is what we had, and this is the other thing. King wrote about 5 books, and nobody reading or talking about what King was talking about in those books, particularly in the last book, in which he was saying, where do we go from here? And so King, was contemplating where do we go from here at that time, which means that he saw that there was a deficiency in the civil rights movement, and so consequently, and that's when he came up with the Poor People's March, and the Poor People's March, in other words, to unite all the non-white and other, people who are being exploited, within the U.S., under the United States economy, under capitalism, and King became an anti-capitalist, and
before you get to that,
yes, go ahead.
Before you get to that, just quick, want to welcome our audience to the conversation. I see we checking in early today, so that's what's up. I see Betty Queen, you out there doing everything, spreading the word, man, and I do appreciate that, doing your thing. Miss Susan Rogers, good afternoon, y'all. Feed the land to you. Always good to see you checking in, Miss Suzanne. Hey, brother, El Abdul Muhammad, man, he said peace, love, and life. Comrades, Ashe back to you, my brother. Good seeing you checking in, and everybody checking in earlier. Make sure, when y'all checking in, y'all joining this broadcast, drop by, say hi, you know what I'm saying? Let us know who it is so we can interact with you, because all of our broadcasts here at NAVA is really a family affair, and we open the conversation out to the people. It's not just us. It's not, in the New African Independence Movement, we capitalize the we, the W and we, and we put the I small because the collective is bigger than the individual. It's about us together, not just one person trying to shine. So, it's no big I's and little U's. It's a big us. You know what I'm saying? So what's up? I see brother Isaac checking in. How you doing, Isaac, man? I ain't seen you in a while, man. But good to see you checking in, brother, and everybody out there. We're talking about the side of Dr. Martin Luther King that they don't talk about in the mainstream media. It's almost like they took the image of Dr. Martin Luther King and they want to use it to promote their own little personal agenda, to say, yeah, and that's something that they've done a lot within our history and our heroes. And what they was talking about in the radio broadcast was we have to take these things back and take them back under our control. And we have to highlight the aspects and the elements of this really going to benefit us going forward in the future. And before I interrupted you, and I apologize, but you were talking about how Dr. King was moving to become like anti-capitalist. He made speeches where he was talking about how America has given whites all of this money and all of these type of things, and how they owe us, and how this system is exploited. And he even talked about how things like education, everybody should have it and they should be free, and he was really, going toward anti-capitalist stance, what I'm saying? Kind of pick up on that.
Yeah. So even, like when he talked about the Poor People campaign, he was talking about that everybody should have an annual income, because America is so rich. Mm-hmm. That nobody should suffer. Nobody should have no income. Something we should have. In fact, they were advocating $4,500 per person. And so this would hit at the root of capitalism, which is profit, to make profit and not allow the people to have money other than to be consumers. And so King, in advocating these policies, became close to being a socialist. Now we don't want to mistake, I don't want to, to exaggerate, because I really wasn't a follower, of the King movement, as people call it today. But what they have done, like marches have become parades. See, when the King was alive, we were still doing marches, and the last march was going to be on Washington. One of the last marches was going to be, Washington D.C. It started in Mississippi, and they were going to have a mule train going up all the way up to Washington D.C., and then they were going to go and protest, throughout, Washington, acting for demand for economic rights of all the non-white and poor white constituency in America. And he was getting ready to organize and coordinate, that campaign, and he was in the process. And then he participated in the sanitation, strike in Memphis. And in other words, because he saw the wrong that was being done in terms of the wages that were being not paid to the sanitation workers, and his fellow ministers really didn't want him to come to Memphis, Tennessee, because they foresaw that the government was going to put more pressure. And then so therefore we had the assassination of King in Memphis. And but they did everything they could to push it to that level, because like the police in Memphis, they created a riot, in the march to King, and they had to pull King out of the march and the others out of the march, and the police started beating folks' heads, SCLC and all, and all the so-called sanitation workers and all that, and so King had to make a decision whether or not he was going to come back to Memphis, for a march on April 4th, and this is what they wanted, because this is how they were going to cut off, the movement, by knocking down one of the leading forces, which was King, was more respected than any other leader at that particular time.
Definitely. So, basically, one thing, that when you analyze King in the direction that he was going, especially, once he started criticizing America on the international scene, right. when he started criticizing the economic system, which is the heart and soul of this empire. Right. The driving force behind it, really, the exploitation of the world is this economic system. Once he started criticizing those things, then he kind of moved to a different stage, to a different, almost a different category of a threat when it comes to the United States. Now, we in our movement, very familiar with this organization and this program called the Counterintelligence Program, which was headed by J. Edgar Hoover during the time, and it basically targeted, all the prominent leaders of the day. Probably still do, things just have a tendency to evolve so they become more efficient. But especially then, they targeted all of our leaders. They targeted, and they led to either the imprisonment, the discredit, in many cases, the murder of them. It led to the murder of Malcolm X. The FBI even admit to causing the rift that led to the death of Malcolm X. And when you study it, they had a lot, to do with that. They flat out murdered Fred Hampton. It ain't even a secret. They didn't even hide it. They just murdered this brother. So when Martin Luther King started changing his philosophy, then he became, public enemy number one, really, as far as a threat, because J. Edgar Hoover would always say to his agents to make sure that we prevent the rise of a black messiah, because he feared that one day a black leader from America would raise up and lead America against the European power structure, the white power structure in America. So yeah, can you talk about how, King kind of put himself in that space where he was a threat like a Fred Hampton and the rest?
Right. So when you look at, the director of the FBI had all kinds of tricks and stuff that they wanted to pull on King. They were trying to keep King from moving to being the leader that he, eventually became. They even had, try to separate him from his wife, and talking about relationships with women outside his marriage, and try to get and try to get King to commit suicide, and so consequently, when King began to take on the position of the left, and the left was the Black Power, the people who were like members of the Black Panther Party, and when King started taking the position of human rights and started focusing on human rights, well, this is when King had to go, because King was still the most recognizable, spokesperson to the media, and so anyway, and we see what the consequence of his assassination was when you had over 247 cities, that people rebelled, so-called riots took place, and they sent the army, to put down black people in Detroit and Newark and the big cities in the north, and so you can see that King, there was no other leader that had the stature of King, and to assassinate a person like that was to cut, what they call to cut the head off, and the second thing that came close to it was Fred Hampton in Illinois, when Fred Hampton was calling for a Rainbow Coalition, talking about organizing all the non-white and poor whites all together in terms of the Black Panther Party. In other words, for a revolution, that is to overturn the system, the economic system, which is capitalism. And so here we are. You see the focus was coming together, where the people, even after they had eliminated King, that they still had to go to destroy organizations throughout, local organizations that were so-called militant organizations. So the FBI used the Army and the 101st Airborne and all that to come into Detroit and places like that and shoot down people that were rebelling against the assassination of King. And so by the time that they got to Fred Hampton, when they killed Fred Hampton, they killed the Illinois chapter of the Black Panther Party, which was the most viable chapter of the Black Panther Party in 1969, even though the Black Panther Party lasted until 1980. But these are the kind of things that we have to look at and understand. And the counterintelligence program, like you said, is continuing, not on that level or not on that scale, but it's to keep any individual leader from emerging as as a leader of African people in the United States. So therefore, when we look at that assassination of King did shut off the focus, but it kept the focus of civil rights before King. You see what I'm saying? Before the change, King was trying to advocate. So they designated other leaders that came behind King in the SCLC, but SCLC no longer had any more power. But it did have some leaders that were around with King, and they went back to civil rights. They went back to the Democratic Party. Black folk going back into the Democratic Party and all those kind of things, and kept us on the level of reform rather than real change. And so this reform came to the point of where even the reform was too much in terms of, because African people began to vote for certain policies and certain parties, and so So consequently, the power of the so-called black vote became an issue where even today they're still they're diluting the so-called vote that might have had some kind of impact, on changing. But vote, we didn't go to prison, and we didn't die for the right to vote. The so-called right to vote was given to black men in 1865 with the 15th Amendment. So our movement was not about voting. You can't vote your way to freedom. And so when we talk about King moving, making that big move, and was getting ready to mobilize millions of people to come to Washington D.C., then we see why his death was had to happen at the time it did, and also he was beginning to bring in the workers movement and sanitation in. So they didn't want to see any worker movement emerge, through the sanitation strike in Memphis. And so everything that went into that from King's death went to a compromised situation where even today the so-called workers in Memphis, are not paid what they were marching to pay to get paid when during King time. So we got to see those kind of situations in terms of that. But we're not saying that King was going to become a revolutionary, but definitely King was vying to continue to be in a leading position as spokesperson for the interests of African people in America.
I think that it really illustrates just the vicious nature of this system and the potential threat that we have, because Dr. King, like you said, he was the peacemaker. He was the great peacemaker. He was trying to do right. His moral, had the highest moral authority, everything. He would even go to marches saying, if it's gonna be blood that's gonna run the streets, let it be our blood. You know what I'm saying? I think that's crazy personally, but dang, this is the type of person that they assassinated because he began to slightly change his philosophy.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like that's just the a vicious nature of this system, that you would take a brother who trying his best to have a peaceful resolution to some people who have been extremely unpeaceful, extremely savage, and extremely barbaric for over 400 years, and he's trying to resolve it in the most peaceful, humane, moral way as possible, from his perspective, and they brutally assassinated him. And the whole idea of a counterintelligence program. I mean, think about the gravity of that. The government actually has an agency that is designed to break up movements that are advocating for the benefit of Black people. I mean, think about that. There is an actual agency that is committed to making sure that Black people don't rise up, that Black people don't elevate our condition in a real meaningful way. I mean, think about the country you living in. If you have parts of your government that's willing to go to that extent to make sure that we do not gain true liberation or true freedom. You know what I'm saying? We really got to examine it. You got to examine and think to yourself, do we want to be a part of something like that? You know what I'm saying? Somebody who's donating resources and killing people and lying on people, locking people up, kicking them out of the country like they did Marcus Garvey, doing all of these things just so we can stop from rising to a level of humanity in which we are naturally supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I mean, so anybody, who has a disagreement with us for wanting to do something for ourselves, I mean, really just examine the objective facts. And I mean, but back to Martin Luther King.
Yes, I want to say that.
Yes.
When we talk about that, we were awakened by these activities by the FBI, because the civil rights leaders, the ones that call themselves civil, are still thinking that the federal government is going to help and assist us and free it ourselves. And the federal government has been the worst enemy of all. Greater enemy than the governors of the states greater enemy than any any local city police, mayor, or whatever, because the government was putting money into all those places and all those spaces to put us down and to allow police to kill us and all that. Just like when I just heard some things about dealing with the police, that 1,100 black folks were killed by police last year.
Yes.
Okay, so but we still have these civil rights leaders who are still trying to call on the federal government to become, and the federal government has been the greatest agent for putting down any kind of element of black progress in any area, and we can see that even in just like in the first Reconstruction, the second Reconstruction. We've seen many black leaders, who are call themselves cooperating, with the system, being put in jail, for fraud and different kinds of things because they can't do the same thing that the white mayor or the white representative could do. So so many of them have fallen, and they were the ones that were considered by our people to be our leaders. So now we don't have anybody that we can trust within the system. That's why we said all remedies have been exhausted, because when we look at the situation, we know that the American dream, as Malcolm X so aptly put it, was the American nightmare, is the American nightmare, and continues to be the American nightmare. And so anybody that's talking about the American dream, that's why we had to say, King had to change, because this American dream, is still American nightmare. We still, we go look at all the statistics and all the things that go with our existence within this system. We're at the bottom of everything, and we're at a high rate of things that are detrimental to us, such as cancer, whatever, because we don't have control of any health process or health institutions. And so that's why we continually are saying that join the Republic of New Africa, join the provisional government of the Republic of New Africa here, because everywhere we are in the world, we have to have control over our own destiny, over our own lives. We have to have control over our politics, our economics, and all the things that be done. And it can only happen when we break away from this capitalist system, this American empire.
Definitely. I want to acknowledge a couple of people in our audience. I see you out there, I'm going to say Grandmaster Teacher, Madam Vice President, Mama Ayo Deli, how you doing? Good to see you checking in as always. And Sama Ott, she said, FTL, free the land, comrades. No doubt, definitely. A couple of announcements that we want to get through. And I hope I can read this on my phone. Ain't really good. It says, save the date, March 31st to April the 2nd, 2023 in Charleston, South Carolina. Come celebrate with the Republic of New Africa, celebrating 55 years on the road to a plebiscite. Free the land. So that's going to be Nation Day this year. It's going to be in South Carolina. And, we get together, have a good time. We strategize, plan, and really actively engage in the activity of nation building. So if you have an opportunity to meet us there, be there, being about it instead of hearing about it, I guess. And also it says national and local New African elections coming up November 3rd, 4th, and 5th, 2023. Get with your local district or local election commission and make your New African vote really count. All right, definitely. Thank you for joining the New African Broadcast Association. Please check out our other shows. New African Perspective tomorrow, Monday, 1 o'clock Central Time, Facebook Live. You can go to the NABA show, my page, or wherever. There's a bunch of places you can see it. Foundations of the Nation, which is Tuesday, 10 o'clock a.m. Conversation between comrades Thursday. Actually it's going to start at 6 o'clock now. It was 5:30, but it's going to be 6 o'clock now. And I think this week we're going to have a special guest, Bomani Shakur, He gonna be live in the studio with us. And let's see what else we got. Let me see. Now I have love and respect for all of the ancestors. Kind of look at Dr. King. Hold on, let me see if I can read it. Kind of, excuse me, I'm my what you call it real. Kind of look at Dr. King, all side-eyed because he he effed us up with that weak S. Yeah, I mean, Dr. King, you know, he was really on that, and that's the critique and criticism, especially, you know, people in any kind of the nationalist, black nationalist movement, New African independence movement. You know, we critique that whole approach of integration. And even himself, by the time he died, he acknowledged certain things, because I think in a conversation with Harry Belafonte, he said he fears that he's been trying to integrate us into a burning house. So even he questioned his own, you know, tactics of integration. So yeah, and by no means, like Elder Fadali is saying, you know, we saying Martin Luther King was a revolutionary, you know, for we still, you know, are at odds with a lot of his philosophies, but we do have to acknowledge the proper perspective of history and what Europeans are doing to his legacy, and using it in order to push their own personal agenda and ignoring certain things that he speaks about. Let me see what's going on. Let's see. Comrade Yera, let's watch. Claudia. Told you I can't show movies right now, Queen. I want to watch the film, but I don't have my setup where I can show movies at this time. Yeah. As soon as I get my setup back running, we're gonna start back running programs that we can watch television programs together. A movies program. I think we watched The Spook that Said by the Door, and we had a great time. That was a hard movie, awesome movie. We had awesome engagement from the fans, but we're talking about the side of Dr. Martin Luther King that they don't talk about, that they don't want you to know about. And speaking of Dr. King, you know, we talked about how as he began to change his philosophy, he became a bigger threat, a real threat to the system. And what people don't know, you know, this led to his assassination. But what people don't know is the family of Dr. King actually sued the United States government for causing his murder, for the murder of Dr. King. And they won. This trial was actually held in Memphis, Tennessee. And a lot of people don't talk about the government was found guilty of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. Can you talk about that?
Okay, yes. So when we talk about King, and you know, like in the family, and who killed King and all, the FBI, you know, killed King. There's no doubt about it. It's almost irrelevant to talk about James Earl Ray. James Earl Ray was deemed innocent in that hearing in Memphis, you know, and you know, in other words, because in some instances, in some documentaries, it's showing that Memphis police officer, you know, was actually the one that fired the shot to kill King. But the conspiracy, you know, was a federal conspiracy and a local, you know, because all of it, anytime they have a conspiracy, all the elements come together, the local and the federal all come together, and they all participated in removing whatever security or whatever the king had, and to know, put him in the spot where he could get shot. You know, all of those things are part of the conspiracy. And they even had, you know, what was his name, Janet Reno, who was a Clinton attorney general, try to say that there was no evidence of conspiracy. We know that's a lie, and that's, you know, and they're not ashamed of that. The other thing is that when we start talking about the legacy of King, right, the King did not have a chance to really change. King was not the leader of the population, of the millions of people, you know, of African people. He was a leader of a certain segment of petty bourgeoisie, middle class black, that were preachers, you know, and others, you know, who are like in the class that's above most of us, you know, and the working. So, but he still tried to come into helping the working class in Memphis and sanitation workers strike, which was a working class strike. And but they were betrayed, when King was assassinated, by their own leadership in terms of that. So therefore, even when you look at that, King was in a process of changing. And I would not advocate anybody to think King, was a leader worthy, of a Malcolm X or somebody like that, that had stepped across the revolutionary line and had advocated our people to come up with their own state, to organize themselves, to break away completely from this system. And so consequently, we find that Jesse Jackson and others, who were, co-leaders of the SCLC, did not follow the steps of King. They went back to the civil rights mode, that King would have had to overthrow, would have had to change completely, from being limited, to reform notion. So still King was a reformist. It's just unfortunate that, like I said, he was not, they saw that there was a possibility that King wanted to become the primary leader and the primary spokesman for his people. And he knew he would have to change because our people were already going in another direction. We called Black Power. And the Black Power, and we were talking, and we were socialists, and we were, anti-capitalists, and we, and we moved to the level. Even the Black Panther Party tried to write a new constitution, for the United States. That's not what I would advocate. But what I'm saying is that they failed in doing that. They were being attacked by the police in Philadelphia when they had the Constitution Convention. The Black Panther Party, and the police came in. Made the Black Panther Party come out and take their clothes off, they had a raid in Philadelphia. So these are the kind of things that we have to begin to understand. This is where we are today. We are today where we must begin to anew in terms of saying we're going to be the human rights advocates of this day. And we're going to organize our people to understand human rights and understand why we must separate from this system, how we must separate ourselves from this system, and why we must come up with allies and who are going to also be the ones that are going to aid us in this process. Because every time there is a real revolution, it has to happen on an international level, and you have to have allies in order to be able to defeat your enemy. So, because the enemy is the enemy of all the other oppressed and exploited people, and we have to join in, continue to be in the leadership of that as we have in the past.
Oh, definitely, great point. I'm trying to do that. Hold on a second, y'all. Okay, my screen's holding up, it's freezing up. But hold on.
Keep on talking till.
Now your screen went out for some reason. Yeah, I'm trying to get our Grandmaster Teacher back on the screen. Hey. So just bear with me for a second. But yeah, we're talking about aspects and the side of Dr. Martin Luther King that they don't talk about in the mainstream. They really try to promote a certain image of it, and that image did exist. You know what I'm saying? That was a part of who he was, but that was he was going into a different direction. He was growing, really. That's all it was. Yeah. It's just growth. And like you said something really profound. Martin Luther King by no means was a revolutionary, or nationalist, or anything of that nature. He never even had the opportunity to, and that's the important thing, because we never know what Martin Luther King could have potentially grown into had he not been viciously murdered. So we don't know, and that's part of the viciousness of this system. Once they recognize that, wait a minute, this Negro has the potential to think of something different, potential to join in with these Black Power folks. we got to take him out because he was probably the most popular leader at that time. And if you have a guy who kind of has the voice of the mainstream, and you connect that with the voices of the Black Power struggle, when those two elements are combined, then that's serious trouble for the damn system. That's one of the reasons why they so viciously murdered Fred Hampton, because he was able to unite people across racial lines. He was able to unite the brown berets, the Puerto Ricans, the American Indian movement, the poor whites, and all of these people, and not under the umbrella of integration. Right. The umbrella of true revolutionary change in this country. So that's why, they didn't even hide it. They just murdered this brother. You know what I'm saying? Just assassinated, say, yeah, I did it, so what? I mean, this just King is an example of the vicious nature of this system, because they didn't even give him a chance to become that threat that he potentially could have been. They cut it off at the source. But yeah, I want to make sure that I welcome everybody in there. And if you're listening to this, you're out there in the audience and you haven't checked in, just drop a line in the comment section, letting us know who you're doing, say hi, so we can properly greet you and join you into the conversation, because this is all really about, collective conversation and doing things collective on a collective level. And like I said, make sure y'all join us this week on Conversation Between Comrade. We're gonna have our special guest, Bomani Shakur. He's gonna be in the house today. I want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on George Jackson Radio, George Jackson University Radio. I was there. What was that Wednesday? Yeah, that was last Wednesday. I had an interview with those brothers and had a great time with them. Y'all don't have an opportunity, go check out the interview. And make sure y'all tune in this week. But yeah, like I said, we're talking about Martin Luther King. You said something interesting that a lot of people don't realize, and I didn't realize this myself, but like I think in 2022, that was one of the highest death counts as far as murders by the police in history. Yeah. And that's something that they're not talking about. You have a couple of cops who have been indicted or persecuted or jailed or whatever, because what they did was so egregious, and America had to come to that tipping point where you're like, oh no, they're about to tear our system down, so we got to have some sacrifices. And they were starting to do little things to try to pacify the people, but silently, what you're not hearing about is that the murders by police are increasing. They're getting higher and higher and higher. And that's kind of how media works, because it's like out of sight, out of mind. We're like, things getting better. You hear police got indicted, or police was sentenced for whatever and stuff like that. But you're not hearing about all of the murders that are continue to happen. And in fact, the escalation of police repression and brutality. You know what I'm saying? You want to address any of that?
Yes. Over 1,100, have been reported. Black men have been killed. Black people have been killed by police in the last year. And this is a low report, because most police forces are not cooperating in terms of sending a report of who they killed, or how they got killed. And so consequently, you have an increase. And this is where we have to begin to understand that this system is not, we'll never be able to surmount any kind of struggle inside this system that is going to stop police from killing our children, killing our people. And so once we understand that, and the only time that we have ever been a stoppage was when we had the BLA, the Black Liberation Army, for a short period of time. Police, felt like their lives might be in danger from a political force, to the point of where they stopped, killing at the rate that they were, killing. This was between the 1960s and 1980. But since that time, we've seen a rise. Since they have eliminated all the revolutionary organizations, they or jail the people who are in leadership of those organizations, then they are feeling safe that they can do anything they want to us as a people. And 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 what I'm saying too is that so now all these civil rights, people, these lawyers, who are saying we had a victory because they what they call put a couple of police in jail. It shows that the egg is on their face now because we're seeing an increase of killing of black, and we're seeing also an increase of money coming from federal government to give to police to be able to do that. So what's his name? Jim Biden, President Biden, whatever his name, Joe Biden. Basically, it's not a friend of African people. Matter of fact, he was part of the whole process of mass incarceration and arming the police to the point that the police are the army, that is uh, that is over our, in other words, in control of our community. And everything, every aspect of every problem that we have, we're going to find that we don't have control over our community. And and we do not have military control over our community. And they're trying to do everything they can to come up with some kind of gun legislation that's going unarm us by giving us what they call that, propaganda against our children or propaganda against our people, to the extent that we have that they have in other words silenced many of the so-called civil rights organizations. So we don't hear anything from about how we're going to organize our people to solve those problems in our community. So it cannot be done under the United States government as long as it's in control, because the U.S. government is the greatest enemy of all of our people. And this is where we got to get our understanding to. And so therefore, when we understand that the national so-called government of the United States is our enemy and not our friend, then we'll be able to pull ourselves from under the jurisdiction of the United States and begin to create our own governance of our own selves. And that is through the Republic of New Africa. I want to make an announcement too that Umar Johnson is going to be speaker in Memphis on April 3rd, and we're going to talk about addressing some of the problems in education and different things that but we got to be clear. It cannot be done under the system as it exists today. It cannot be done, and it will not be done. And we have to seize control of our community. There's no doubt about it. We have to seize control of our. If we don't seize control of our community, all these problems are going to multiply and be even worse. And until we understand that we got to seize control, of our community, that means of our children, of our, neighborhoods, our schools and stuff where our children, point out, we have to understand that they're tearing down buildings that used to be schools in our community. So we can't even seize the building to create a school. So we're going to have to create our own buildings and have a school separate from totally separate from the so-called system that it exists today.
Definitely. You said a whole lot. I want to go back real quick to the announcement you made, because on April 3rd, that's correct, Dr. Umar Johnson is actually going to be here in Idlewild City, Memphis, Tennessee, and I think it's going to be a whole day event. Is going to be marketed as the Million Father March, I believe, and yeah, it's going to be a lot of things going on, and just I don't know if this matter and stuff like that, but I'm also going to be speaking in the event. I'm a clown, I'm a cut up, so don't want to see Dr. Umar come out and see me, but no, but yeah, so make sure y'all take this out. Stephen Muhammad, I see you in there. You said, free the land. Martin King was more than just I have a dream. The government and Negro leadership allowed his legacy to be reduced to that Dr. King challenged Dr. King, oh no, you gotta excuse me, man. My phone is kind of, I got a regular phone, y'all. I got a regular phone, so on the side I can't even see where it is. It's just like real little over here. But let me try this again. Let's see. The government and Negro leadership allowed his legacy to be reduced to that. Dr. King challenged the government at its core value system, and he challenged the legality of its policies relating to human rights and civil rights. He included he indicted, America before the World Court. And I think we was talking about that because that's ultimately what you're talking about is when he began to shift his philosophy. And he made some, like, literally, until I actually done some research on Dr. King that was outside of what they tell us every year and show us on the television. I hadn't heard, the speech about Vietnam. When I heard the speech about Vietnam, I'm like, hold on, that's Dr. King? That's the I have a dream, dude. That's Dr. King talking like that. I'm like, and it kind of shocked me. So I advise everybody, go a little deeper, especially if you're a fan, and you're a civil rights, we used to call them civil writers. But don't just look at the aspect of our history, our culture, and our leaders from what the colonizer tells you. Because, if a lion teaches you the history of the deer, then the deer is always going to be the pacifist. It's going to openly give their lives. They ain't going to tell you about the deers who want to fight back. Ain't going to tell you about the time the deer did a back kick in the line and it knocked him out. You know what I'm saying? Not saying that actually happened, but they're not going to tell you that, so that's really important. And actually, it's another something else that been going on in the news, a story that I did want to talk about, but it's right along the lines of the oppressor taking our history and our leadership and colonize it and then giving it to us in a way that would allow their reign in their exploitation to continue. And I know this kind of like way, changing the subject way a little bit, but it's a comedian by the name of Kevin Hart. A little comedian, little funny dude. He's actually has a show scheduled in Cairo, Egypt, I think in February. Now, there have been some individuals from Egypt who are protesting this brother because they say that he said that the ancient Egyptians were black. Now, honestly, from somebody with a degree in history, not like that matter and stuff like that, from the white university, some people that's important. That's true. That's something that is factual. Is European people have whitewashed Egypt. Egypt has always been a very difficult, has been problematic from the system of white supremacy because they like to study of what they call Egyptology, kind of emerged during the same time of the height of the African slave trade. Well, not the European slave trade, yeah. European enslavement of African people. So you have this great African civilization, which at the time you have a European economic system that is based on the exploitation and enslavement of human beings, and their justification is that these people are uncivilized and they have never did any contribution to humanity. But yet you got one of the greatest civilization ever, where we get all our science and mathematics. You have colossal monuments and things that's right there that is truly African, that is clearly African, that goes in contradiction of your claims that these people are inferior. So what happened, you saw the whitewashing of Egypt. First thing they did is they denied that Egypt was even a civilization. And when they couldn't do that, they denied that Egypt was an African civilization. They tried to make it more European. And they even on some maps, it looks like Egypt is not even in Africa when it's right there in Africa. And apparently, this propaganda, this brainwashing program it still affects us today, because you have some people, and I don't think is most Egyptians say that. First of all, the ancient Egyptians never called themselves Egyptian. That's what Greeks called it. You know what I'm saying? Be clear on that. You know what I'm saying? It was Kemetic, Kemet, you know, land of the black. But like I said, you still have people who are holding on to this white supremacy doctrine, because there are individuals who calling for Kevin Hart to be banned from Cairo. They tell him he can't, his show got to be canceled. They trying to cancel the brother altogether. And the whole cancel culture is ridiculous to me. But they are viciously attacking this brother. And like I said, I think it's just a minority of people that's just speaking loudly. But I say all of these things that we are the only people on the face of the earth that is not allowed to talk about our history. We're not allowed to talk about our history because of this European slave trade, because of the enslavement of African people. These European people have hid our history, stole our history, lied about our history, claimed our history for them. And once our people start recognizing and waking up, then the liar feels threatening, because their lie is beginning to be revealed. And I thought that was an interesting story, because we heard all about what happened with Kanye West and Kyrie, because they were giving some unfortunate truths about the Jewish people, the actual people who were actually bloodline Jews, which were not. But anyway, y'all know the story, what happened. But you had any thing you want to say about this particular story?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a book everybody should read. It's called "Destruction of Black Civilization." And so even when you talk about the population of Egypt today, you know, the original Africans, many of them are still in Egypt. You know, but they were forced. The majority of Africans were forced out. You know, when the Arabs, you know, came, you know, did their invasion, you know, in the early 16th century, 6th century at least. And so consequently, they have pushed Africans. The Africans had to all go inside, go inside. They went intern. They went to Sudan, went to, you know, other, you know, areas that the Egyptians, and wound up in Ethiopia, you know, with the first Christian church that was established in Egypt. You know, his headquarters now is in Ethiopia, out of the Bab, I believe. So when we talk about that, all of the pharaohs, every last one of the pharaohs, you know, was African until you know, until the time of Cleopatra. That's when the Macedonians, who were like the Greeks, Alexander, came in, and they married themselves inside of the, you know, papacies. Then you had the first, Pharaoh, you know, first so-called, you know, so it was about maybe 300 years out of thousands of years that you might have a rule of a Pharaoh being not African. Almost all the pharaohs that were in the pyramids were African. And so, and the Egyptologists, you know, who shout out as a racist so-called scholarship, was then challenged from within by Africans from West Africa, who became, you know, the leaders of understanding what they call that DNA. The DNA, you know, has verified that that all the pharaohs, you know, that were in the period, you know, that they have stolen all that, you know, wealth and stuff from Egypt, were African. And so, for anybody to attack somebody, you know, based on these falsehoods, you know, and let me say this, you know, when you know how they have made Cleopatra white, you know, Elizabeth tells them, but you know what the real thing what happened with Cleopatra when Julius Caesar took Cleopatra to Rome. Cleopatra had a thick nose, you know, in other words, she was black, and that's why they came out. They attacked, you know, Caesar, and they wound up attacking Antony. You know, and causing the death of Cleopatra. But Cleopatra was the last African queen, queen within the context of ruling Egypt. The Romans came in, and the Romans basically destroyed much of the libraries and things, that showed that that Africans, were the ones that taught not only the Greeks but also the Romans. And so there's a book they call Africa, Mother of Western Civilization by Dr. Joseph Ben Jochannan. And it shows how Africa, was all of the so-called France and Britain and all of those people benefited from their conquering Egypt. And Egypt, in other words, once they conquered, they took all the materials and destroyed whatever they could to try to show that, that Egypt was not African. Even they shut off the nose of the Sphinx. So the Sphinx, because the Sphinx had an African nose, face, the whole face of the Sphinx, the nose is shut off because it was an African nose, a thick, shows that, so and it was shut off during the time of Napoleon, when Napoleon was emperor over France.
Exactly. One thing when you study in ancient Egypt, you have to understand that Egypt was a civilization that lasted over 4,000 years.
Yeah.
First of all, that's amazing. 4,000 years. Now, when you look at Egypt today, the people look like some of everything. Right. And that's because Egypt has been invaded several times by, different individuals from, different people. Yeah, like different Persians. People. Yeah, the Persians, the Greeks, Alexander the Greek, the Romans, all of, from different time periods. So now you have people looking like everything. And you had, the Islamic invasion of that, right. So a lot of Arabs like to claim the civilization of ancient Egypt.
Right. The curious thing about that is that they built the Aswan Dam. I'm talking about the Arabs. Over a lot of pyramids and stuff. A lot of stuff. It's under that dam. If you were a people and that was your land, you would not be destroying, your monuments by building a dam over, over the monument. So a lot of things is underwater, and then the Africans who built the pyramid were not slaves. They have shown the home where people Africans who were the workers who built up the pyramids, and then no outside force, didn't know Hebrews or nothing like that come to be build up the pyramid. The pyramids were built long before the so-called Hebrews came in when they were starving, over in Canaan, and their kinsman Joseph was a friend of the Pharaoh and allowed them to come in, and supposedly they're supposed to stay 400 years. But who were these Hebrews? All of these people were African, were black in color, in their skin, they were non-white. So consequently, even if they stayed in Egypt 400 years and there was no segregation, in Egypt, then certainly when they moved out, they can't, even if they came in white, if they left, when they left, they had to be, non-white, because there was no segregation of, people in terms of their, intermingling and all that. So even when we talk about the most reactionary type of stuff in terms of what's happening, that we got to understand that the Arabs are not the original Egyptians, and like I said, the original Egyptians, there are still segments of the population that that are purely African in their orientation. And so these are the kind of things we have to understand. And so when we talk about Africans, and then we as Africans have to understand that we were not brought here. We did not voluntarily come here. We have a right to return to where we came from. And so, I mean, and that is the whole continent, because if we deal with the European slave trade, it encompassed the whole continent of Africa, because who came to control all those areas? Egypt, Sudan, name all the countries that they given names to and all that in Africa, and you'll find Britain and Germany and France and Spain and Portugal, and even America when it comes to Liberia. The Europeans took control, and the Arabs, even were under the rule, the exploitation of the Europeans, in the countries across North Africa. So when we look at it, we got to begin to say, hey, this is our home. This is where we are from. We have and there's no way that Kevin Hart should be stopped in any kind of way. He stopped himself from carrying out his engagement.
Yes, excellent. Yeah, just wanted to pick up on some of the things you were talking about. Starting back with the Arabs, as you said, when the Arabs, came to Egypt,
right,
they did a lot of things. Like you said, they studied much of the ancient history.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. There's tons and tons of history that's underwater right now,
right,
that we don't have access to. But not only that, there are many sacred sites of ancient Egypt that they built a mosque over.
Right.
You only found them because they had to dig through like the mosque, and you discovered, wait a minute, this whole other structures underneath this.
Right.
So the thing about it is, people do not desecrate their own ancient history.
Right.
You value it. Only someone who has no respect for that culture, that civilization, would do something like that. So it's a slap in the face for a bunch of Arabs to come in here and talk about we were dangerous when you didn't give a damn about the culture in the first place, and your actions dictate that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so you have that on that level. And it was another point that I wanted to make that I forgot, but it don't matter. Hey, I'm getting older too. But I'm gonna go back to the audience, because I believe we got people got excited about that point. We got engagement with that. Let's see. Stephen Muhammad said these protesters are believed to be U.S. backed. That would make sense, you know what I'm saying? Because I don't believe that this is a majority of it, because when I was reading some of the comments, they was like ignorant, they was like saying stupid stuff like Egypt is not African. I'm like, man, what the hell? You know what I'm saying? If you live in Egypt and you say something stupid like that, like you don't know geography, like damn, that sounds like something that some European person who believe in white supremacy and love of Greek think they the Greeks started civilization, lies like that. Let me see, Madam Vice President, true, they were truth and more truth. Definitely. Let me see. And our ancestors left evidence of our Black existence. That's why Dr. Ben and others went there to study. Yeah, we have one thing that I can appreciate a lot. Dr. Ben and others, Ash Rod Quasi, Anthony Brown. We have a lot of historians who go to Africa, Egypt specifically, and document the evidence. And it's tons and tons of evidence. I mean, when you study, if you have a question about, whether the Egyptians were Black or African, all you got to do is study their own writings. They say, their ancestors were from Kush, and we know Kush has not been the victim as the invasion as Egypt. So Kush, they still look just like we do. You know what I'm saying? So they pay homage to where they get their concepts and their ideas and their spirituality to. It's always been an African culture. They've always been, a part of Africa. It's only later that in order to justify a slave trade of African people that Egypt became something other than Africa. And as you spoke on, there were no slaves in Africa.
Right.
You know, that's a big myth that people perpetuate to this day. Oh, this you work harder than a Hebrew slave. That's, you know, what people say. But the reality is, some of the, when you talk about ancient civilizations, Egyptians had great records. They took great records. They recorded everything. And it ain't no evidence whatsoever that there were ever any slaves in Egypt. These were master builders. These were architects. These were skilled workers. These were masons. These were, you know what I'm saying, builders, great builders. They weren't enslaved people. So that's another lie that has been perpetuated on our people. That these people, you know, were enslaved. And there's so many lies that we have to uncover and undress and reveal. And unfortunately, you know, it's part of the mental and spiritual enslavement of our people, because they lied on our history. They tried to get rid of our history in order to justify the exploitation of our people. And we're still suffering from, you know, those lies to this day. Let me go to Melly Queen. She said, everything in the world, in this world, has been whitewashed. You're right about that.
And I want to say that as a youth, and going through the educational system of Egypt was separated from the rest of Africa. You know, because the Europeans wanted to claim, you know, Egypt as their part of their, you know, civilization, so-called civilization. And one thing we have to begin, and this is what's happening even now. So nothing about Africa has been taught. Matter of fact, geography is really been taken out of the school systems and stuff. So, so they're able to get away with, you know, stuff because, you know, we are not educated to the point. That's why we have to say we got to take our children out of these places that are, you know, that are what they call it, white supremacists, organized by white supremacists, and the white supremacists are still telling lies about us as a people, wherever we are. And, you know, just like in this country, where they made they call the native people savages. Well, that's what they did when they went to Africa to talk about, you know, when they went to conquer the rest of Africa. They were going to conquer savages, and they tore down whatever, you know, they tore down our past, you know, structures and things, and that's what's happening in West Africa right now, is under the so-called guise of Al Qaeda, you know, that they're trying to destroy Timbuktu and other places in West Africa. You know, this Arab, you know, initiated, you know, invasion of Africa, and because Islam would not have, just like Christianity would not have continued to exist if it was not for the African, you know, institutions that were set up, you know, in Egypt and Ethiopia and all over the place, and so but now that they think that they have power, they want to destroy what is left of African culture in certain places in West Africa, such as Mali and Ghana and places like that. And matter of fact, it's more Christians in Ghana than it is in, you know, any other religion, you know, and so the traditional religion is being you know, canceled out by these foreign influences, you know. And so so even on the African continent itself, they're going to the European, you know, get the European education, and this European education is a miseducation of African people, of all people that are non-white.
Absolutely. Let me go back to some more of these comments. Madam Vice President, I think you said, and I'm sorry, y'all, I can't hardly read this because it's like really, really small, and I'm already have not too good of eyesight. I think Herodotus, I'm sorry. Du Bois, Chancellor William Van Sertima, George James, Dr. Clark, and so many more. Egypt has been colonized for a long time. And I think when you said that first name Herodotus, that's Herodotus. He's like giving credit for being like the father of history. Yeah, the father, which not true. But they give Greeks credit for being the fathers and founders of everything. But even when you study Herodotus' writing, he mentioned the Egyptians as being black. Yeah. When you look at Greek writings, they say that these individuals were black. All through, they only start becoming white, light skinned or whatever, one after invasion and historically after people started trying to justify slavery. So I mean, when you do the research, it's real obvious. You know what I'm saying? And all you have to do is you just go to the ancient writings themselves, and it'll show you. Even in the paintings, in the structures, they tell you who they are. They draw pictures of themselves, and others. Yes, matter of fact, yes, they have pictures of what they look like, what invaders look like, what other people look like, and they clearly had when they had that white dude, what they call the Hittites or Hyksos or whatever they was. Hyksos, yeah. You clearly saw, them some white dudes look like they was, how the Vikings with the tattoos and all of that. They made a clear distinctions between who they were and who other people were. So, this whole idea that the Egyptians were something other than what they really are is ridiculous. And the fact that Kevin Hart is getting criticized for simply telling the truth is just another example how this white supremacist power structure has dominated the entire planet, and we have suffered. What happened to Kevin Hart is another, to me, no evidence for reparations, because that's just part of the damage that this system has done to us. And let me continue with these comments. Let me see here. These ancient structures bear witness to our African spiritual practices. They do, they do. The ancient Egyptians had a spiritual system in which the whole world basically was trying to copy off of. When you look at the Greeks will even tell you we was basically trying to duplicate the civilization of African people. You know what I'm saying? We was trying to of Egypt. Right. Many of the scholars that we praise to say, well, not we, but European people praise, say, oh, they were so great. They studied from Egypt, in Egypt. And they had to convince them that they was even worthy of the information, because back in them time, knowledge was like power, was extremely valuable. Everybody didn't just have access to the sacred knowledge of the day, the sacred sciences. Because like when you study the Egyptian spiritual system, the sciences of Egypt, European people call the Egyptian mystery system. They call it the mystery system because it was simply science and they didn't understand it, so they called it a mystery. You call things a mystery because you don't understand it. Once you understand it, it's no longer a mystery. But because Egypt was so advanced, and it was during a time where many cases European was still in a nomadic state in the caves, this kind of crumbled, destroyed, and it's history all over Africa. We focus a lot on Egypt, but this history is all over Africa. African people had great civilizations all over Africa. Right. But Egypt is so obvious that it just blew this whole concept of white supremacy out of the water. Like, oh, hell no. That's what we learned about our sciences ourselves from these people. So how the hell can they be inferior, So yeah, let me go to my brother. Stolen Legacy. That's another one. Another one you gotta read, must read. Our brother Freedom Power, historian C.R. Gibbs found archaeological proof of the Egyptians' artifacts that gave us the evidence of the first workers' strike in the world in ancient Egypt, which demonstrated that the workers were paid, whether in food or money is not clear, but they were not slaves. Maybe a lower working class, but not slaves, definitely not chattel slaves. Well, first of all, that whole principle of chattel slavery, that's a European thing. You know what I'm saying? But definitely, we have all type of evidence of our ancestors about who they really were, and it's just it time up for all of the lies and the deceptions. We can't even allow that. We need to push back on them. I'm not always the advocate of this, just standing for like entertainers, because I understand entertainers are entertainers. They are not leaders. But when our people get falsely crucified, like we tend to do happen all the time, especially on something like this when it's relevant to our history, we got to push back on it. Let me see. Currently, we have the works of Professor Manu Imp. I know I'm not seeing that. I can't even see all them letters. Primary researchers and historians study Aswa in Kemet for some 30 years. We also have Black women historians and archaeologists like Professor Nubia Warford Pope, whose work in historical archaeology is involved with archaeological research pertaining to ancient Kush and African diaspora, Benzil, I think, in North America. And y'all gotta excuse me, like a lot of these letters, I can't even really see them on the screen. I'm just recognizing words and saying them. So so I apologize for for not being able to read these comments. But definitely, come on, bro. Don't call me now. I'm doing the show. But definitely, I mean, this is just another ridiculous example of our people not allowed to talk about our history. I mean, it's bad enough that they lied about our history, uncovered our history, made their history, stole our history and gave our history to them. It's like the first cases of identity theft. They stole our identity, and now they want to punish us for uncovering our identity. It's like they lied on us and then they mad at us for uncovering the truth. But we almost been on for an hour and a half, and I think we had a good show, and I appreciate all the engagement. Grandmaster Teacher, anything you want to lead the people with?
Yeah, say this. When we talk about Egypt and talk about Africa, first of all, even the boundary of Egypt as it is today is a smaller than what Egypt, Sudan and Egypt, what they call Egypt today, and all of that one, that was Egypt. And the Egyptians always recognized that their culture came from the south. That was when you were talking about, Kemet,
yes.
Coming from in other words, the culture did not come across from, let's say, Palestine, down and go down south. The culture came from the south, which means that it's an African culture. In other words, Egypt received its strength from the African cultures below it. Yeah, and if we look at it and begin to understand that, then we'll understand that they have, when they have rewritten the maps of the world under European control. And that's why we have these names like America for this land, which was after the so-called Italian name, America Vespucci. And then if you go back and look at Africa, at one time they had Rhodesia, Northern Rhodesia and Southern Rhodesia, which is Zimbabwe and Zambia. And so these are, these were where our culture was being virtually destroyed by settler colonies, settler colonists from England and other places, that came in and took over. And it's only been 50-something years that you had most of the so-called African states being so-called independent, being recognized by the Europeans. So so in 1957, when Ghana was given its independence, it was the first state that that had won its independence from the British, and all the rest of them follow. But so neo-colonialism is what we are suffering from today throughout wherever we are. We have heads of states being looking like us, but they're representing actually their so-called mother countries. And so anytime we deal with that, this is a very crucial element of trying to get our people to understand what Africa is and who we are as Africans. Because if we don't get to that point of our identity, if we're still stifled by thinking our identity is different from being African or being whatever we determine once we get wind of the revolution, then we will never get to the point of being able to engage the enemy. So this is a very important effort that has been made by our scholars, and many of the scholars who are deceased. So that's why I keep trying to talk about where do you get the knowledge, how do you go get the information. You're not gonna get it out of no university. In most universities, you have to go back and dig up those scholars, our scholars, our African scholars. I think somebody said Dubois. You can name a bunch, throughout. We'll find that it's Africans who made their own discovery and who wrote their own history. And this is what we must trust above anything else that's been written by Europeans.
Definitely. So, like I said, we've had hold on, my bad. We've had a really good. My bad. I'm having some technical difficulties, but like I said, we had a really good show today. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Everybody, make sure y'all, spread the word. Let everybody know that, we're trying to educate ourselves and we're trying to collectively work together to engage in those serious, necessary work of nation build. You know what I'm saying? Because the only way we're going to effectively make a difference, effectively change our lives collectively, is we gain control over the things that control our life, that influence our lives the most, the institutions, the systems, all of those things that affect us on a serious level. If they're controlled by people who don't care about us, who only really care about what we can do for them, how they can exploit us, then it's going to be very difficult for us to make real change about our lives. I mean, you see, we're in a situation. There's things that we've talked about today. We talked about how there is the existence of a government agency that is set up for the purpose of destroying our movements that benefit us. We talked about how when, people like Dr. Martin Luther King began to actually change his philosophy in a way that would actually make meaningful change for our people, they murder him. You see how, something as simple as a comedian who makes us that. And the thing about it is, what's interesting is nobody really don't even know if he really said that or not, because I never known Kevin Hart to really talk like that, because they never really produced a tweet of where he said that. So I mean, they don't even know. This story just came and it just flooded, and he got all kind of serious hate for saying, his ancestors were his ancestors, saying that the Egyptians were black, the ancient Egyptians were black. So we got to have our institutions that we can control, and we can tell the truth about our history. We can uncover the lies. We can dig up the research. We can dig up the researchers who've done the work in preserving our history. The parts of our history who have not been completely destroyed. There's not underwater, in which the Arabs had flooded much of the history, and so much that has been lost through this period. But we got to be able to do for ourselves, y'all. Thank everybody for tuning in, and we will continue to work, and we will continue to build, and we will continue to grow collectively. Like I said, pass the word on, And we love y'all. Thank y'all for joining us. And we're gonna leave y'all with our freedom cry, and that is free the land, free the land, free the land. And normally right now I just put on a video and get up out of here, but I wasn't even ready for that. You know, I got wrapped up in the conversation. But yeah, like I said, join us tomorrow on the New African Perspective with Madam President Sama and Madam Vice President Mama Ayodele. Again, join them Tuesday on the Foundations of the Nation, and join us Thursday in Conversation Between Comrades, where the Minister of Information himself, Bomani Shakur, will be there. And make sure you join Melly Queen on Truth and Power Corner on a blog talk show, 5:30s on Fridays. And then join us again next Sunday with the Voices of New Africa. We'll see y'all again. We love y'all. Free the land.
And when you bring it in, you brought it in for the purpose of weakening the revolutionary tide of the people.
It must not be a capitalist system, but we don't want to exploit anybody. We don't want to be exploited, and we don't want to exploit anybody.
Ain't nobody gonna do it for us. There's nobody outside of